Hello, welcome to Studio One. If you like what you see, like and subscribe and comment.
I'm Amy from Charlotte Spiral.
I'm Avi.
We're a duo from South London in the UK, and that's it.
Perfect. Before we get into the music of it all, I've been doing these Zoom interviews for now a year. Before I used to do like in person and all, pre-COVID life. So before we get into music, how have you guys been doing? I know you're based out in London. How has, quarantine been? How has, COVID been over there?
We live together, so it's been good that we can write a lot. We spent probably the first lockdown over here. We wrote loads of new songs. It was just after we released our first EP, so that was our main focus, was just to write songs. Avi's studio is just downstairs in the building we live, so we can just go there and record and write music. So we're really lucky in that sense. And we have a lot of friends that live around here too, that are also musicians. So yeah, we haven't had to do much traveling, or we haven't felt super secluded or anything. So we've been pretty lucky. Yeah.
Yeah, I would say so. I mean, obviously, it's not easy for anyone, but but we can still do the things we like to do, and our families and our friends are healthy. So yeah. It's all fine.
Perfect. And how has like growing up in London, how has that kind of infused itself in the music? I think I read that you guys individually kind of did music in other places before you guys came together. So touch upon that part.
So I grew up in the UK. Avi didn't. I grew up in near Bristol, so there's a big music scene down there. And then we both met at Goldsmiths University in London, which is right next to where we still live. We still stayed here 10 years later. But it was amazing to go to uni here and to meet so many different musicians from London and around the world and around the UK. We've made like a community of musicians from our course where we studied music, and we've met loads of people from doing that as well. The guy Avi has a studio with, Dave Akumu, we met through Goldsmiths, just from him kind of being involved with other people. Avi's met a lot of people, you can say yourself, but yeah, exactly. There's a big scene over here, which is really nice.
Yeah, definitely. Like Amy said, I grew up in Tel Aviv and moved to London to study in Goldsmiths. And I guess it was kind of a choice to make. I guess when I left Tel Aviv to do music, I wanted to be in a place where I knew the music where there is an interesting music scene, and I felt like it will be a place that inspires me creatively and allows me to meet the people that I want to work with. And London so far is definitely answering all the criteria. So,
sorry, I was just going to say that when we were at university, we wrote a lot of music together then, but it was quite different to what we were doing now. We were trying like very different, like electronic stuff, and it was a lot more like heavily produced and about that, rather than it necessarily being about songwriting. And it's kind of developed to this over the last like 8 years or something like that.
That's a good point to make, because I was just going to ask, I can imagine how many songs you guys came together before you started officially releasing records. What song have you guys made, whether it's released on the EP, not the new one that's coming up, the old one? Which song or which idea kind of came together and you started realizing like this works? Do you guys have a song in particular, or?
I think it was actually from a song on this EP.
Really?
Yeah, I think the first song we actually wrote as this project was the track. I don't know, have you heard the whole EP?
Yes, I have. Yeah.
The track called Things You Lost, that was written a long time ago.
Yeah.
And we produced it with our friend Callum, and then kind of left it. And then we went on and wrote the other songs for the first EP and kind of just decided to leave it off. But actually, when we were putting this EP together, realized that we didn't want to just leave it. We wanted to include it, and we had it done, almost done. Abby and Callum made some edits to it recently, but yeah, that was the one. It does feel kind of different to the other songs, I'd say, but it was definitely that one, I think. Do you agree?
Yeah, totally. I think, to be honest, I think the main shift happened when one of our friends had moved a flat and had to get rid of his piano. So we suddenly had a piano at home.
Oh yeah.
And it just kind of changed the way that we write music, and it became this slightly different thing that was much more centered around writing from like just figuring out like harmonies and melodies and building songs up from the writing rather than from a production. For me anyway, that was the kind of big change in the way we write music. So it was all kind of a fluke.
And it's interesting too, because I've talked to a couple of artists about this idea too. As a fan of music or a journalist, we don't know when like a song was created or made. We get it on the EP and we think it's brand new. As artists, what makes you think like this could be a 2-year-old song, but it works now on this EP? And like, how much faith do you have in the music to make that assumption? Like, it's gonna work now, you know, in terms of not scrapping something.
I think we try to have like a timelessness within our music. So the hope is that it wouldn't feel dated, or I guess that's due to the nature of it being not like heavily produced and being about like mostly about the songwriting and the piano and the arrangement like that, rather than it being about this huge production. I don't know. It's just that I think that song has a particular sentiment that I didn't want to leave, and I'm not sure I would write something like that again. It was quite important to put it out at some point. And who knows, you might put it out later on, but it kind of feels like it's already been a few years, so we probably were about to put it in the bin.
Yeah, it becomes more difficult to put things out the more time goes on since you wrote them. And it's like a weird thing, because it's almost like I don't know, me anyway, I find myself listen to the music when we write it, and then I don't actually listen to it once it's out. So it's almost like the songs are more alive for me before they're being released, and so it's this thing of like, it's almost like, okay, I need to let go of this song, so it's time to release it.
Yeah. Are you guys together in that, in terms of holding on to music? Because a lot of artists too, you know, they're it could be hard to release a record because you've spent so much time on it. So are you guys, I guess, similar in that regard?
I think I used to be, you did too, I think, really precious about everything. But I think after we have so many friends in music, and I think people are putting out music so much now. I think we've got a bit more used to the idea of writing something and letting it go. And I guess with like streaming and stuff, I think people do tend to come back to things more than they might have before. I don't know if that's completely true, but yeah, I think people will come back to it at some point, I hope. And you've got to think like that. Otherwise, you'll never put anything out. I think it will be harder when we come to writing an album though. And I think we probably will be a bit more precious about it. But I feel like that's a bit of a time away yet.
And in terms of the first EP you guys did, and one of the standout tracks, you know, Wide-Eyed, what did you guys learn from that release that has kind of helped this upcoming new release?
Well, it was a different time because it was just before the last lockdown. Well, we didn't really have much. We didn't really have too many expectations because it was the first thing. I don't know. We knew that this would be harder because it's just we had like a gig to work to on the last release. We could film a music video without worrying about getting COVID. we could go to the studio with Dan Carey, who produced it, and record it without so there were a lot of different things. It was a different thing, but there was also less pressure to like finish the EP because we didn't have anything out before it. Whereas this time it was like lockdown hit just after we released our EP, the first one, and we were like, oh, we're about to go and record more with Dan, and then we couldn't, and it kept getting pushed so it was like a pressure to kind of get something out, and it's been a year, so there was a lot of that in our minds, I think, especially mine. Do you think?
Totally. In terms of I think the experience of the first EP, it was really interesting because we kind of wrote some songs and then we just started playing them to some of our friends or people in our kind of circles. And it was interesting to see how people react to it. And in a way, the project was in such like early stage that it was still developing as it was being starting to be presented to people in some capacity. So I think for me, the main lesson was that the kind of coherent thing in the music is the songwriting, and that we don't need to be so precious about the process in which we record things or like how exactly do we do it, which studios we do it at, who, like it was more as long as we keep the kind of our style of songwriting in the center, then those things will make sense together as a group of songs. And that's something that we try to carry over to this EP as well, because in terms of recording that EP, like Amy said, one of the songs is the first thing we ever recorded. The other one is a song we recorded at Dan's studio. And then the third song is actually something that we had to do remotely. So it was like sending audio back and forth over like WeTransfer. So in terms of like the recording process, it was quite different for each song. But I think hopefully it manages to kind of make sense as a whole release, just because we just believe that the songs make sense as a piece.
And listening to this new EP, of course, with the piano, it adds like an array of emotions to it. But listening to a lot of the songs, or the 3 or 4 that's on it, there's kind of the sense of like hopefulness on the EP that you can get from a lot of the songs. Talk to me about what this EP represents for you guys.
I think just to compare to the last EP, that felt like it had a bit more of a all the songs are kind of about the same thing, like about feeling fed up with the same situation, like a very mundane feeling that everyone feels. And that was what carried through that EP. This EP has songs which kind of have a similar theme, same kind of vibe, but slightly different. So Out of Here, the first track, is kind of about going around in circles, actually very similar to the LCP, but kind of getting to a point where you feel so frustrated and so annoyed with this like situation, which probably isn't that big of a deal, but to you it feels like the worst thing ever, and it's the worst thing you've gone through, and you just like want to get out, but you don't know how. And it's definitely a very dramatic song, but it's not necessarily about a very dramatic thing at all. And then New Light is definitely a more hopeful song. It's something that came out of I don't know if it necessarily came out of looking at social media necessarily, but it probably was in the back of my mind. But it's about comparing yourself to other people and thinking that what they do is better than you. But actually by doing that, you're kind of getting off your path and you're making things worse for yourself. And it's kind of a message to myself to kind of keep focused, which is often really difficult. And it's kind of funny that song it was written just before lockdown, I think, but it came just as everyone was probably going through that. So it's probably more relatable now. And then Things You Lost is, like we talked about, it's quite different. It's just a message to someone who's lost someone. So it's kind of like a love song in a way, kind of like but that song feels kind of different. And then the outro is, we wanted to kind of have this like cyclical thing running through the EP. So the outro is based on Out of Here, and you wrote Avi wrote that one. Yeah. Do you have anything?
It's just like a piano interpretation of the first song that is like semi-improvised.
And with that, how important is sequencing an EP, to connect it? How much thought, went into that idea?
Yeah, we always want to try and do something like that. I always want to have themes that run through, and I always loved like albums that have a concept, and I think it was part of maybe studying at Goldsmiths, as we looked at a lot of records and music that had concepts and like would draw on specific themes throughout, and I think I took something like of that with me through everything I do, and it feels weird to just like throw like 3 different songs together without linking them in ways, either in sound or lyrics or even just like a sentiment. So having that piano outro just felt like a really good way of, but it's not really an outro, it's really like a song on its own, but like bringing the EP back to the beginning again. And that's kind of a metaphor for how I was feeling in that Out of Here track, just kind of going around in circles. So yeah, do you agree?
Yeah, totally. I think I can speak for myself in that I don't necessarily know how to write standalone songs. It's always more about creating. It's more like a feeling.
Yeah.
And I feel like having those songs put together and sequenced in a certain order is you kind of guiding a listener through a certain journey of emotion, and that's what we can hope to do as musicians. So I feel like that's like our way of guiding someone through those songs.
Mm-hmm.
And usually when I get to like the end of interviews or close to it, I'll ask like an artist, which has kind of been a common theme this past year. So usually I'll say, tour dates and shows and all this cool stuff, but we've all been locked in. So for you guys, how are you guys feeling now about the EP, and how are you guys going to feel when it's out? Are you going to immediately think of a new EP and go on to music, or are you going to let it sit?
How do we feel about this EP? We feel good about it. We really just wanted to put something out. So I think we're always kind of ready to move on to the next thing. Like Avi said, once we've like signed it off, we kind of are ready to move on. And I think we've got lots of songs that are like in the piano voice stage that we want to work with people and finish them and put them out quickly. I think now people are a bit more settled and understanding of how COVID's working and how we have to live with this now. We can figure out ways of recording things safely and be able to do it, rather than last year just being a write-off for that kind of thing. So we're hoping to get a lot more music out this year and just keep doing that, really, because that's what we love doing.
Yeah. And there's loads of songs, so we're just gonna slowly have a go at each one of them until they're ready to go out.
We might do some kind of live performance as well, like from here.
Yeah.
Who knows?
I mean, it will be really nice when shows come back.
Yeah.
That will be best, really.
Mm-hmm.
Sure. Overall, to the point of sequencing and things like that, I really do think your music is really like an experience, and it's amazing when an artist releases a record and it's meant to be played front to back. You kind of feel like you're really a part of something. So I really think the EP is really great. I appreciate you guys taking the time out for this interview. Really looking forward to all the things that are next. But until now, the EP is really great, and Wide Eyed is amazing. It really pushed me to listen to the more music. So thank you guys so much.
So glad you liked it.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thank you. Hopefully see you soon.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay.
Have a great rest of the day.
All right.
Bye.
You too.
Studio One.